We're in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, actually halfway up Mount West, and I'm visiting the acclaimed sculptor Brendon Edwards. And I'm enjoying a coffee. Filter coffee is one of your favorites, Brendon.
Definitely, yeah.
Yeah. So tell us, what inspired you to first of all build your studio halfway up Mount West?
Well, I like being closer to God, but seriously, no, I just love being in the mountains, and I love the views here.
Yeah.
And the peace. It's very quiet here, fantastic views, and fresh air. So yeah, beautiful place to live.
Yes, with spectacular views.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you can see the whole Drakensberg here on a clear day.
Yes.
And I think, if I'm correct, this is the third highest point. Mount West behind us here is the third highest point outside of the Drakensberg in the Midlands.
Yeah.
So sometimes you're above the clouds,
Yes.
which is quite an amazing feeling. You know, you're looking down on the clouds without
Yes.
being in an aeroplane, which is.
Yeah. So you find nature inspires you then?
No, definitely. I mean, it's. I think most artists get inspiration through nature or from nature.
Yes.
So it's definitely got a huge impact.
Yeah. So I asked you to bring 2 books out of your library.
Yes.
What are they?
Well, the one is The History of Beauty by Brendon Edwards, which has got a fantastic sort of, more of a concise, I'd say, of the history of art and you know, going back to antiquity to now. And then Eduardo Villa was obviously a very famous South African sculptor, and I've always loved his work because of his use of steel, something which I use a lot of.
Yes.
And you know, and I think he was one of the first, or probably the first in South Africa to do steel on a sort of a monumental basis,
Yes.
which I like to do as well.
And he also does it in different sizes. There's small Eduardo.
Yeah. He completely crossed, you know, from small to huge pieces, and so for me, it's the fact that he was South African, or I mean, it's Italian born, got sent here as a prisoner of war and then stayed. So he had a European and an African influence in his work. But yeah, his biggest contribution was here in South Africa. So I think it's an important book to have as a sculptor.
Yes. Yeah. But it's also interesting that he was part of the art movement, the Amatlozi.
Yes.
So being a Zulu word, we're in the KwaZulu-Natal Midlands, and I know you speak Zulu.
Not very well. Yeah. But no, I think that's also a very poignant fact, and I think it comes across in a lot of his work. You know, you can see a lot of African. I mean, even the cover here we're looking at the top of this is almost got a very African Zulu kind of expression within it. So you could also almost see a sort of a Lesotho hat almost as well. So
yes,
there are a lot of interpretations in terms of African influences in his art. Yeah.
Yeah, and you've also sort of travelled much. You know, you were a professional rugby player at one point. How much?
Aren't we trying to forget that?
I don't think so, because it took you to all over Europe. You played all over Europe, and then you would have been inspired by the art you saw there.
No, definitely, but I think a lot of people find it very difficult to marry those two contradictions, you know, being an artist and a rugby player. But no, it definitely did. I mean, playing in France was incredible. I think France has got to be probably the most culturally rich country I've seen from an art perspective. You know, obviously Italy as well. But yeah, amazing place to live and play rugby. Yeah.
Yes. So did you go and visit the galleries?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, I was playing down in south of France, but often we had weekends off. I'd be straight on a train to Paris, you know.
Really?
And I went to all the museums I could go to. Yeah. And obviously there's a lot of public art there, you know.
Yes.
I mean, just the Eiffel Tower as a steel work on its own is just an incredible feat of art for me.
Yes,
you know?
yes, exactly.
It's amazing, yeah.
Yeah, because let's say this sculpture right next to us. First of all, what is its name?
So this was called Tom Chobe's Blues. It's inspired by a song by Tom Waits, funny enough.
Yeah.
But I give a lot of my work songs names because music's a huge influence from a philosophical perspective. But basically, all my work is based on cosmology, science, and philosophy. So, and funny, you talk about this work. So, when I was first exhibited at Everard Reed,
Yes.
Mark Reed said to me, "Your work reminds me of Bernard Venet." And I, to be honest, didn't know who Bernard Venet was.
Yes.
So I had to Google him. And my work is very, very similar to his. And I have been accused of copying him.
Yeah.
But I honestly didn't know who he was at the time, which just shows that, somebody can be doing something somewhere else. And look, he's a lot older than me, and he's probably, and he's French. So
Yes.
he's probably one of the world's greatest sculptors at present.
But that's also part of social consciousness.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, his work is more unfiltered than mine. Mine's more deliberate. I try and make my work into musical notes relating to the orbit of the planets. So
Yes.
Pythagoras' music of the spheres,
Yes.
Kepler,
Yes.
all that kind of
But
science.
That's maybe a good point to segue into Umberto Eco, because he's a professor of semiotics.
Yes.
And that's the meaning of symbols or art, that sort of interpretation. So you very much, in my mind, it looks like you prescribe to that.
No, I do. I think it's a very good question, and it's quite a controversial question, I think, for art, because I think great art and great artists. So let's talk about artists across genres. Let's talk about Beethoven, Michelangelo as a sculptor, and Van Gogh as a painter. I think if you had a chance to speak to them, they'd probably say that the work that they did, it came through them, not from them.
Yeah.
So it's like having access to a divine consciousness or a divine will.
Channeling that.
Channeling, yes. So I think when they start out with the work, they actually don't know.
Yeah.
They're getting guided. It's like it's like the poet writing a poem. Sometimes the words are coming before you've even processed what they mean.
Yes.
So I think meaning and volition behind a work can be two different things. I think a lot of the time, the meaning and the sort of acclaimed critical wording it usually comes after the art is finished, and not while the art's been made. So for me, my meaning in my work is very much based on, I'm more interested in how we relate to like there's a saying, we come from the stars, we return to the stars.
Yeah.
So I'm more interested in our position in the universe and how we relate to that. Whereas someone like Eduardo Villowood was more interested in about the human dynamics of culture and interconnectedness between cultures. So my art, I would say, is probably less political than most, and more scientific, more philosophical.
Yes.
So my meaning is, I'm very interested in those subjects, but that's why I always find artists who are arrogant incredibly, I find it very unpleasant, because I think any good art or meaningful art comes through you, not from you. You're just a vessel.
Yes.
And you should be humbled by that.
Yeah.
Not become arrogant by it. And I think if you look at even Beethoven, he was an incredibly humble guy. He said that, Handel was the best musician composer that ever lived. So if you look at these great artists, they understood that. So I think meaning at the time and meaning post and pre are all have a timeline of their own, so to speak.
Yes. And I read this book a long time ago when I started dealing in art, for example. It's also a fantastic history of art and why people created art. What is beauty. So I want to ask you that sometimes art is described as not beautiful and not well finished and not polished. What is your view on that?
So, I mean, that's also very, I'm going to give you a controversial answer. I think 90% of art today is completely fraudulent. I think it's an absolute joke. I think, you know, people say that art is the only open concept, and it is. It can be open.
Yeah.
It can be anything you want it to be. And yes, you're welcome to buy it. But I think great art has to have an elevated consciousness.
Yeah.
It's got to be trying to reach the highest form of consciousness we can. And what is that? That's beauty, it's proportion, it's hope, it's love, it's trying to make the world a better place, not a more macabre place, not a more sort of despaired, disillusioned environment. So, and if I look at some of the art today, I just think, you know, how can people actually buy that? You know?
Do you think it's commercialized?
Completely,
Is that
yeah,
what you-
completely commercialized. And I think a lot of the curators are involved in it. I don't think art is, like, if you look at the art that was created in the Renaissance, for instance, whether you like, you know, that classical antiquity look or not, if you look at Michelangelo's David, I mean, it's just, no one's done anything remotely like that since. And and it's not about, lots of people have done the human form since him and before him. And we'll talk about a sculpture in here just now. But what I'm saying is, when you look at it, that sense of how it makes you feel, the sense of soul in it, so to speak.
Yes.
So there's definitely a spiritual aspect to any artwork. There's the matter, which is the canvas, the oil, what you see.
Yeah.
But it's that spiritual aspect that's important in the work. It's how it makes you feel, how it connects us all together, how it, as I say, tries to elevate all of us consciously.
But do you think your work is almost academic, so you have to have an academic understanding, or do you think anybody can spot brilliant art in a split second?
Well, I mean, I don't want to say my art's brilliant. I mean, I think that's, I'm just trying to say one shouldn't be arrogant. I like to think that the art I do doesn't come from me, it comes through me. And so when I do a piece, I like to think that when somebody looks at it, they get a sense of hope and joy.
Yes.
And a sense of life. And if you get that, you don't have to understand it. Yes, there's a lot of, for me, a lot of, like, that Beethoven piece I did was, you know, taking an octave of his and related that to the planets and how sound and color relates and all that. So yes, there is a lot of academic, a lot of science, a lot of cosmology involved in it. But I hope to think you can just look at it and go, geez, you know, that's cool. That's nice. You know, that I don't like the word nice.
Yes.
But you know, that's
Inspiring.
it's inspiring. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do you want to speak about?
Yeah. So if we look here, I mean, this was done in the early BC.
Okay. And what are we looking at here?
So this is La Cahoon. It was a sculpture done in the early BC, and it got lost in antiquity, and they rediscovered it in the Renaissance time. And this sculpture was what Michelangelo says is one of the greatest pieces of work he ever saw, and it inspired Michelangelo.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is, like, as I was saying, talking earlier about form, I mean, if you look at how well this is done, and then in Michelangelo's David, and how this form must have inspired him to do the David. It's still a human form, it's just reinvented, you know.
Yeah.
And this was actually done by three sculptors from Rhodes Island.
Yeah.
And but I just think it's fascinating that 1500 or maybe 1700 years before Michelangelo, this was done, and then you compare this to what he did, and this was the major influence in him. So I think, some people say, is there something original? Maybe, but most of the time we're just reinterpreting.
Well, we're inspired by
and we see it through our own lens, through our own consciousness, through our own soul, you know.
Yes.
But I think it's a magnificent piece of work. And as I said, done by 3 artists, not one single artist.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that also brings up the topic of people who assist you in the artwork. To what extent?
Do you get assisted? Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Well, I mean, we all know, like, there's a big controversy about Jeff Koons at the moment.
Yes,
is he an artist or is he a designer?
Yes.
And I do, and you know, like Richard Serra with his massive steel artworks, I mean, you know, part of it's done in a mill, part of it's done in machines. You need massive crane trucks, a lot of my work.
Yes.
So, yeah, that's quite a blurred line. But I do think that as long as you're conveying that idea and you actually do have a hand in it, like I actually do weld my work, I angle grind it, I weld it, I place it, I'm very, and I obviously need, they're so they're massive, I need hands on deck, you know.
Yes.
But at the end of the day, it's exactly as I see it.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the bronzes had to go to a foundry.
Yes. You see. Exactly.
And it was the patina was done there. Et cetera, et cetera. So,
and that foundry also has to be very good at conveying what you've done in clay, and that's an art in its a skill in its, or an art you could say in itself.
Yes.
You know. Yeah.
Yes, and interpreting what patina the artist wants. Yeah.
Yes. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's. Well, anyway, it's been fascinating chatting to you.
Yeah,
Brendon.
thanks, James. Yeah, I'm glad you came and visited.
Yes, thank you. It's been wonderful staying here. Thank you very much. Yeah.